So probably not going to be anything too crazy today for a video up here because it is actually snowing. It is about 34 degrees here in Tahoe and the snow is coming down. What a crazy winter that we've had, where basically all of February, March, we had zero snow, and then when we hit the end of May, almost June, we're actually getting some snow, and it is freezing. I'm glad I got in a hike yesterday along Squaw in the mountains, because today we're back to winter. On days like this is when I really start thinking I've got to get out of here. But then I have an in-depth thought about where I would go, talk with some people about where they live, and then that always changes my mind and makes me think, you know what, this whole Tahoe place, even if one day we're at 75 degrees and then the next day we're at 35 and snowing and it's just cold and kind of cloudy and miserable, there's still not too many places like it. I think in a way, just because I feel that there are opportunities here for normal people, just because there's so many service opportunities. And it seems that's what the world is really built on. How's it going?
How are you?
Good. Are you working on
Yeah.
the...
Sure they're still here.
What's still here?
The boat.
Oh.
Yeah,
With-
when we
with-
get storms like this, the wind will come up.
That guy was saying that when there's storms, the waves can get so big here that they'll start washing all of the kayaks and the paddle boards into the lake. He was like, I just didn't want to come down too late and then have to fish all these kayaks out of the water, which right now is very, very cold, and I definitely would not want to get into the water with the wind chill, how cold it really is. But anyways, it seems like with service jobs you can make a decent amount of money, especially when you're serving people with money. Those with money, at least up here, are relatively more generous than, of course, a person who has no money. And it seems to all be relative to where you live with how much you make, like lower cost of living, and then your wages are just going to be lower. And it seems like now the gig economy's kind of made it more acceptable for companies to just pay hourly wages rather than having salaries. And I've never really seen an hourly wage get over, say, $45,000 a year. It seems like that's where they all settle. And then salaries typically start at like $65,000. And the thing is, when you're older, you feel like you should be able to leapfrog that whole hourly wage, $40,000 a year, because it's just harder living. Like, we don't really have a backup. There's no parachute for us. When you're older, everything's a little bit more fragile because you gotta pay for your own housing, food, all your insurance, your phone. There's just a lot of responsibilities that come with being an adult. And going back to like your teenage years of earnings is tough. I mean, it's doable, yes, but none of us really want to do it. And I think that's why I've been sticking on Uber for so long, is just because even when it's not reliable income, it's still like the amount of time you can put in every day, and you can still make good money on it. It just takes longer to make that good money, perhaps. But, you know, going and working even at $20 an hour, you know, you're still looking at that $40,000, which after taxes is maybe $36,000. I did just listen to, on taxes, an interview with Jeff Bezos, and he said one thing that I thought really cooked, and that was, why are people who make, say, $75,000 or less even paying any taxes? Because it's such a small amount in the bucket that they should just not pay taxes at all. Which I would say kind of makes sense. Because most of our tax comes from super wealthy anyways. And I tended to get some kickback from a few people who were commenting on my last video where I talked about the super rich and how we're kind of being divided. And I think that there was some disconnect because I wasn't talking about the people who make $500,000 or less. You know, it's the people who are making over, say, $10 million a year. I think there's a big gap between a normal person who, say, is $500,000 a year and maybe even $1 million. Like, that's really not an exorbitant amount of money these days, depending on where you live, of course. But if you're gonna make that kind of money, you're probably gonna live in a place where it's expensive, and that amount of money can go pretty quick. You know, I think that our whole country and our economy runs on those people that's really 100,000 to 250,000. I wouldn't really call that rich. The thing is I think we're kind of combining that idea of someone who's, say, 250 a year to the billionaire. And people are saying, oh, I like this person because he's a self-made billionaire. And just being someone who really thinks about a lot of stuff, I started thinking, like, how is someone a self-made billionaire? To me, it doesn't make sense. That just seems preposterous. You have to have assistants. There's other people involved. You're making money from employees, from investments, other businesses. There's no way of you doing it solely on your own. And there's and most likely there's so many investors that whole statement just sounded like astronomically in another universe of difficulty. And I'm not saying that they don't deserve it, of course, but like, just to say, like, I did this all on my own and I had no help and I didn't have connections, it's just not realistic. Now, this might be a pretty controversial point of view, but maybe the one person who could be, like, say, closest to the self-made billionaire would be Elon Musk. And that's even giving the point that Tesla was on government subsidies for so many years. And you could say the same with Amazon. Just these companies haven't paid taxes, you know, or at least they got tax benefits, tax refunds, money given to them for so many years because we know it's beneficial to the whole country to have an Amazon, to have a Tesla as businesses here in the States. So we want to incentivize. But to say that Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk did it all on their own is kind of a fallacy, I would say. I mean, a lot of it they did on their own, and they started with businesses before, or they got loans and investments, or they came from families with money who was able to give them some capital. But when I listen to people who are really wealthy and they talk about our political leaders or certain CEOs and talk about how they're just these pure entrepreneurs who started these businesses, it seems like to me in a way it's just a way to justify their own wealth and their own self-importance, that I've done this great grand thing on my own and no one was there to help me and it was all on my own and look how great I am. And it seems to be a slap in the face to a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs who have started businesses but just didn't get to that scale or didn't have the funding to get to that scale or didn't have the networking. Most of us didn't get to go to Ivy League schools and colleges and have some of the benefits that go along. And it would just be nice to have some recognition from people who are super wealthy that they had benefits that a lot of us don't have and don't have access to. And even if you come from a family that, say, is making $250,000 a year, like, it's not the same as being Larry Ellison's kids and then make a video game just because you want to make an art project or something. I mean, just having the networking ability and then the family connections and the school you go to gives you vast amounts of networking ability to then start things that just normal people wouldn't be able to. And it's just, to me, it's just frustrating when I'm around people who just say, well, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and like I did it all on my own. And it's not true. It's a lie. It's kind of like what I was talking about in my video yesterday about people being laid off from tech jobs. And if you even look out here, like all these boats, these aren't owned by multi-millionaires or billionaires. It's just kind of like the normal person who makes that salary of, say, $100,000, maybe a bit more. They have a spouse that makes about the same, and they have nice things, and they have it parked here, so they're able to buy a nice boat. They can park it here, and then someone has to like take care of this property, manage the boats, manage the slips. They're renting a space, and they're sharing the money around. And it's a lot of people doing that same thing, which makes all of this viable. And it really makes the whole country run. And it's really sad when I hear about these positions and jobs going away because of AI. And if enough of it disappears, if all these people can't afford these boats and these like small luxuries of life, even a second home, that's what's really going to trickle down to the rest of us who provide the services. Companies, say like even Uber can make a good amount of money. Like they can make millions of dollars. Their CEOs and executive team can live really great lives, make a lot of money. But so can the drivers and the employees of these places, and they can make enough to live, to provide housing and food on the table and take care of their kids and send them to school. Maybe not the best in the world, but a lot of people, that's not really the main goal. It's not to be super rich. It's to have your place in the world, at least make maybe a small dent in your local community and be comfortable. But it just seems that there's this corporate strive to make things automated, to take the human out of the equation and just say, you know what, good luck when we're done with you, because our main focus is shareholders. And infinite returns on your shares seems to be this form of late stage capitalism where it's just going to eat itself, and in the end no one's really going to come out the winner. Maybe a select few who will become royalty within the country, and if that's the direction we want to go, then I guess that's what the ruling class and our politicians want. But for the majority, it's the end of the road. And I think that there is just a place for everyone. Like, I want people to make good amount of money. I want like Nvidia around. I want them making graphic cards. I want cool video games. I want people making good art, music. I want there to be like a good corporate structure that rewards risk and taking chances and coming up with new technologies and new ideas, like revolutionizing the taxi industry with Uber. Just, I don't know, coming up with new technology, the cameras, self-driving cars, electric cars, new ways of paying for things. I think it's all fantastic. And it should provide ways for everyone really to win. But we can't just forget about the normal people, like going and getting gas today and paying at a front desk or buying snacks in a gas station. Like, that person has a job too, and they're making basically nothing. And there's not really much conversation or talk about how is that person actually living and providing housing and getting to work, because you know that they ain't making nothing. And if we want to import millions of people to do those jobs, then I guess that's a decision that we can make, and it's a viable one. But then again, they're still in the country and still having to do the same thing as that American guy who's bringing up your snacks or working as a cashier at the grocery store. And we're going in a direction that their livelihoods just aren't even viable. I think the last point that I kind of want to make is we really shouldn't judge people based on what they do for work or how much money they make, because I think there's a certain level that we will always try to work for to live a certain lifestyle that we want, and it doesn't have to be super elaborate like someone else's, perhaps. The problem is when our income doesn't reach the level where we would like to be comfortable at. And I suppose that each person has their different levels, but it's not that people are lazy and don't want to do more work. Maybe they're already at a comfortable level that they're fine with. The thing is when you drop below that and you keep lowering your standards to maybe meet your income level that you have, that's when our society could start to crumble. And when people will do anything to make money and to keep a certain lifestyle or a minimum lifestyle afloat, that's when we could just start losing all of this, and society in general will then start to collapse. And I'm kind of seeing it already, where people get too desperate and then they will resort to crime, theft, whatever it takes, selling certain illegal substances out of desperation to maintain a certain lifestyle. And I think that's been portrayed in movies, like the person who lived in a Toys R Us and stole products from the store and then sold them, and then eventually to robbing the whole place with a gun and shooting someone. It's a movie that's based on a real story, but these things do happen. And I personally don't want to live in that society. And I don't think anyone super wealthy really wants us to be there either, because they benefit from the services of normal people. But we still got to give those normal wage earners a chance. And we can't just strip it all away. People will always be needed. And I think that we can't lose the plot that human beings have to work together for the mutual benefit of each other. There can't be just one winner and a bunch of losers. Like the 1%, they can't just be the 1% winners and then 99% losers. There has to be a tide that raises all ships, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And with that, this is getting long-winded. And so I think it's good to sign off. And I do see some blue skies up there. So maybe our little snow flurry has only lasted the amount of time of this video.